This is the Shattering the Taboo podcast. Let's change the paradigm together with your hosts, Austin, Aesthetics, and Bebe Chez.
So what are the brainwave patterns? How should your brain be acting normally? What would be beneficial for your brain? And this is moving away from day-to-day activities and taking time for things that will get you reset, get you closer to a lower brainwave activity. And we'll talk about that. So what are things that move you away from a good state of being that's healthy, that's regenerative, that's creative, that is also conducive to meditation, for example, or better sleep? And two, what things will bring you closer to that? Next week's episode, I would suggest you show up because I'll be talking about a concept that I developed, which is called eco wellness. And I've talked about it in other spaces, and I'll be having the Sungens on. It's a great community, a small community building organically. They're doing something really interesting that I think is going to be important for the future. And in that particular episode next week, I will be talking about the importance of reconnecting with nature. And as you'll see today, one of the best ways to shift your brainwave activity away from a higher beta state is through reconnecting with nature. It happens within minutes. So depending on what I do, it could be this somebody asked me this in the podcast last week, I forget who, related to things that people found relaxing. And certainly things that you find relaxing can be conducive to changing your brainwave activity to make it so that your chemistry, I think as we talked about last week, is one that actually promotes health and well-being. So we're going to talk a little about sleep. We'll talk about how you can enhance lucid dreaming and why is it important for your mental health. And we'll also emphasize the difference between quality sleep versus quantity of sleep. I think a lot of people focus on the number and they don't focus on the quality. So we'll talk about that. Austin, what do you think about that? Let me respond to my wife actually real quick.
Yeah, man, we definitely need to talk about the brain waves because that's really all sleep is like a change in brain waves at the end of the day. And it's crazy how just like changing them can alter our consciousness so much into that different state. So you talked a little bit about the beta and the alpha. Really, I want to focus on the alpha waves, which are like the first stage of sleep. And that's where you're the most relaxed. Also in the morning too. So these brainwaves are when you're just like relaxed, you feel me? It's what you want to aim for, basically. But yeah, if you know like the other ones, you could go into them, and if you know like the different sleep cycles, that would be cool to tell them about.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so let's start. One of the things I want to mention is right now, what level of brainwave activity you're in. And I want to mention, if you stay till the end, I'll be sharing a breathing technique that I think you'll enjoy, that is designed for helping you fall asleep. So to combat a little bit of insomnia. And so you want to stay till the end. And if you're interested, you send me your info. I'm more than happy to share an infographic with the explanation for this breathing technique. Okay, so right now you're in beta. Your brain is just chugging along, taking in the stimuli that you're receiving from the senses. The problem is that we've gotten our consciousness. Remember, you are a disembodied being having an embodied experience. And if you've been to my spaces before, I've made analogies to describe how this works. But today I'm not going to talk about that. I'm just going to mention that because I have gotten my consciousness used to engaging just the outside world, whenever I engage the inner world, I start to feel drowsy and I can't stay awake. And the other component about this state that we are usually in during the daytime is that we often push ourselves beyond the normal limit and we go more into a high beta state. Hey, Anthony, nice to see you here. And we go into a high beta state, and this is the one associated with stress and anxiety. So, what happens is as I start pushing myself, I start taking in too much energy from the environment. I get too overwhelmed, or I'm trying to do too much. It starts to cause, imagine like a little needle, and it's right at the 0 point, and all of a sudden it just starts going crazy. It starts going to the positive side, back to the negative, and we start getting incoherent brainwave activity. Your brain starts to fire more, but fire more doesn't mean it's working better in synchrony. There is another brainwave state that goes beyond that, which is tapped into if you become more of an expert meditator, is the gamma brainwave activity, which is higher than beta, but it's in a very powerful, focused, coherent way. And you can access it, oddly enough, by slowing your brainwave activity and going into deeper states. So when I am let's say I'm in a classroom setting and I'm a little bit sleepy, maybe bored by the class, I may be leaning one way, my head is not aligned with my spinal cord, I may start to go into alpha, and my brainwave activity starts to slow down, and it starts to fire at a certain rhythm, a certain frequency. And in that state, children are more apt to be in this state naturally, especially children younger than 7 years old. And it's one of the reasons why they are a lot more suggestible. Whenever I do an event, it is very important to actually get my audience in a slower brainwave state, in an alpha state, because they're actually going to become more receptive to what I have to offer, what I have to sell them. This is kind of like the art of like hypnosis. So as I go into this slightly deeper state, my ability to attend to the outer world may be diminished. I operate at another level of consciousness, but I start to tap into a greater creative state of being. This is why often greater creative leaps happen when you are sleeping. So I will, for example, I've had many moments where in sleep I get ideas that then I implement into the real world. So sleep is a great avenue for me if I know how to awaken and to receive the signals for me to be able to access a part of me that is a lot more powerful and insightful and intuitive. So knowing how to get into a lucid dreaming state, and Austin later will be sharing some options for that as well as I will. And it gets really interesting what can happen. I'll give you an example of a strategy that I used and how it woke me up immediately in the dream. It didn't wake me up physically. It woke me up in the dream, and I was able to learn things that I wouldn't have if I stayed in this more kind of first person, out of control experience of dreaming that we normally have. So, another thing that I wanted to add, and then I'll have Austin jump in here, is what are things that move us more into a high beta state, and what are things that move us more into a deeper state? And one of those things is, I mentioned earlier, is reconnection with nature. So nature is a technology that is designed for us, for our own well-being, whether it's the sound a bird makes, better yet, the orchestra of all the beings in nature. So if I sit in nature, take in the sights, the sounds, the smells, it actually starts to change my brainwave activity. This is why it's important to take breaks in nature or to try to bring nature into my household. There are different ways to do this, of course. And in that podcast next week, I will be sharing how do you go about doing this. So you want to make sure you don't miss that. And things that move you away from this more relaxed creative state, of course, doing too much, being stressed out, anxious. The things that we often associate with mental agitation, with discomfort in everyday life, are the things that are going to push us away from that. And in the era that we're moving into, where we spend a bulk of our time looking at a screen, it is not conducive to deeper states of relaxation. So often when I work with people, I try to teach them how to build in a schedule where they take breaks every so often. And I did a tweet about that recently, I think this past week. And you take breaks so that you can kind of reset yourself and move yourself away from a higher beta state and closer to an alpha state. And it's not that in the alpha state, I am going to be less productive. It is only in that relaxed state that I'm able to do more, to be more creative. And so you want to be in that state more.
Or the SWAT team, they say smooth is slow, or they say slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So by going slow, sometimes you actually end up being faster and more productive than if you're just jumping around trying to do too much and getting nothing done. So yeah, like you said, being relaxed is the main benefit of alpha waves, but they also do increase creativity and your overall health too. Because when you're reducing stress, you're just less likely to get sick, deal with diseases, and your body just functions better. So it's very good to be using these states when you can. And a study actually did find back in 2019 that alpha waves can reduce depression symptoms in people that have major depressive disorder. They looked at biofeedback, so people could look at their alpha waves in real time and try to relax and increase their alpha waves based on what they're seeing, like electrically, like they were hooked up to a computer type thing. So they did biofeedback training where they would train themselves with like meditation, relaxing techniques to produce more alpha waves. And those people who increased their alpha waves through this training had less depression and less symptoms. So we do know that we can increase our alpha waves with our own willpower, our own mind, basically, which is really cool. How we can consciously shift through like brain waves if we know what we're doing, especially if it benefits us mentally.
I think people don't realize the power that they have. And every time that I work with people, it's amazing to me how when they do, they stake claim and they say, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do a technique, they end up, I see the difference in their eyes or in their complexion or in their voice sometimes because I've gotten really good at like hearing different intonations. I notice a big difference in them and in their energy level. So it's really under our control to determine how well we sleep, how we wake up, how productive we can be by building in us into that day. And of course, if anybody wants to come up, if you hear anything you want to chime in, by all means, it's meant to be also very conversational. I mean, I love sharing, but I also like interacting. So if you want to come up, feel free, just request. So, um, so you go through different stages, and I want to mention a couple of things in terms of sleep. The ideal schedule would be going to bed at 10 p.m. and waking up at 4 a.m. At that 4 a.m. time window, if I still am I'm not accustomed to it, it's a great opportunity for me to force myself up. And there are certain things that you can do to then lie back down that will be much more conducive for you to then go into lucid dreaming. And I'll share a story later of how a hack that I used to use so that I could study while I was sleeping. So like I would study and then also I'd be like, okay, I need to rest now. And then I continue studying while I was asleep. And then I would wake up and of course crush the test. So it's like you learn to like maximize your time. So the question is why 10 p.m. to 4 a.m.? Well, there are certain cycles of nature. Everything has its highs and its lows. There's certain things that peak during the daytime and certain things that peak at nighttime. So during the 24-hour cycle, there are two 12-hour windows where your body functions, your systems function at peaks during certain 4-hour time windows. And during the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. time window is when your digestive system peaks. And it's when you should be resting to be able to heal, to be able to detoxify, to cleanse, etc. That is the time that where you go into this dreamless sleep state. People should normally drift into this state very easily, but of course, if I've gotten my schedule out of whack, it may be difficult for me actually to transition into this phase of sleep. So I may find myself tossing and turning, and it's 11, midnight, 1, etc., and I'm bypassing this critical time window where I should be healing. Then something very interesting happens at 2 a.m. Your nervous system starts to peak. And if you were to actually be vigilant, start journaling this, you'll notice that around 2 a.m. you start dreaming. It could be a little earlier, it could be a little later, it depends. It may vary slightly. But then at 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. is when my nervous system peaks and is when I start dreaming. But more often than not, I am dreaming in a very passive way. I have experiences, most of which I may not even remember. And I wasn't an active participant of that. That's where this kind of lucid dreaming aspect comes into it. So being able to be more aware, and there are ways to cultivate awareness, mindfulness, breathing techniques, meditation, of course, that and in addition, practice of yoga nidra, which I've done here in spaces and Discord, is another great way. When I mentioned earlier what things bring you away from beta and more into a conscious alpha or even theta, which is a little bit deeper state, would be yoga nidra. Yoga nidra is almost like a prelude and eventually can be a way to meditate. It is a way because the separation between meditation and sleep, there's almost no separation. The difference is, are you able to remain conscious during those deep states of awareness? The deeper I go, the more I withdraw energy and consciousness from my nervous system, the harder it is for me to remain aware. I want to drift into this kind of unconscious mode where I forget everything. I lose sense of self. The other thing is that there is a difference between sleep meditation, I'm bundling them together, and ego bodily awareness. If I am conscious during a deep state of sleep or a deep state of meditation, there will be no body, there will be no ego. You experience yourself in a beautiful state that I wish I could give to everybody, where there are no barriers between who you are and the true self. You experience yourself exactly as you are without the need to fill it up with anything, which is what you do on a day-to-day basis. So during that 2 to 6 a.m. time window, we often don't maximize that time. You should get some REM sleep. It is usually during, once you get out of the deep state, those first kind of 90 minutes afterwards, roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours, are going to be this REM sleep. And that is a great period for your nervous system to do a lot of consolidation, to do certain important brain activity that is good for your brain and for learning, memory, things of that nature. But then afterwards, we just stagnate. We lie there and we then oversleep. And so I teach more advanced, I haven't taught it yet in the NFT crypto space, but I intend to at some point, is you then learn how to take advantage of the 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. time window. That is where you can do a lot of work, good work, that is beneficial for the rest of the day, for the rest of the week, month, years, etc. That is where you can do yogic practices, breathing practices, mindfulness, different things that you may resonate with that are conducive to this state of flow where I can be more relaxed and more creative and never know what it is to be tired. But people think that often sleeping a lot leads to greater levels of energy. It actually is some more often than not the opposite. Yeah, could it be that I've had a rough week and then all of a sudden the weekend comes and my body just needs it and I just crash. And maybe I sleep 10 hours and I wake up and I feel really refreshed. Yeah, that can happen. But that's actually a sign of being dysregulated. You're out of sorts. You're out of rhythm. And so if you're interested, send me a private DM and let me know, and we can cover at some point how to get in sync with this natural rhythm, because there's certain time windows where you should consume more of your calories, where you should be physically active, where you should do the bulk of your mental work, so on and so forth. And it's very important to learn this. So I'll let Austin chime in for now.
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, I noticed like I've gone through stages where I've been like a night person and I've also been a morning person. And I've always noticed when I'm a morning person waking up earlier, I get way more stuff done and I just feel better, more energetic throughout the day. Now, I've never been on the 4 a.m. schedule, but I did do like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., pretty close to that. So I may try to do the 4 a.m. and see if I can get even more done, because I do prefer the morning person, higher energy. I notice like you don't really need the nap as much too. In some way, like less can be more with sleep and energy. So my experience supports that. Another thing you mentioned is a benefit of sleep is that memory consolidation, and that's what a lot of people don't know, is sleep is super important for memory. Once I realized this, like my grades improved, studying was way easier, because the best thing you want to do is study and focus on your goals like right before sleep, so it's fresh in your mind as you drift to sleep. And while you're in that alpha stage, which, like you said, you're more receptive and your subconscious is more receptive to in that alpha stage. So that's why if you study, you focus on your goals, intentions right before sleep, or even right in the morning when you wake, it'll go deeper into your subconscious and you'll really absorb it. You'll really remember that information. So that's a little study hack trick. You want to do it right before you sleep.
Yes, TJ, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. Thank you for hosting the space. I saw the topic for today, and I was like, oh, I need to definitely join this and hopefully gain some insight.
Thank you, thank you. Do you have a question you would like to share or add anything?
Yeah, I did. So you were mentioning the 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. time window and getting on the sleep schedule. So would that be a total of 6 hours of sleep in general, or would you wake up at 4 a.m., do mindfulness or study during those 2 hours, and then go back to sleep for an additional 2 hours?
Yeah, it depends. You like what I often teach is like hybrid practices for beginners, because it's very difficult for somebody to go from what we normally do, which is we lose consciousness, we go through this kind of passive dreaming phase, we wake up, and now we're active again in the outside world, and we never entrain ourselves to experience deeper levels of self. These deeper levels of self, we often um, uh, would call it, these deeper levels of self, we would call them dream, or some people would call them a spiritual realm or higher levels of consciousness. We're not accustomed to that. So I would wake up and, um, I would take some cold water, throw some cold water in my face. I would get ready to, one sec, I mentioned, yeah, okay, there we go. I would then have a nice big glass of water. I would sit down and I would get really into my practice. I would start doing my breathing. There's breathing techniques that you can practice. And if I am not accustomed to doing any um, any meditation, something deeper, it would be very difficult for me to sit there at 4 a.m., especially if I just began. It would be very difficult for me to be able to get into that state. So one of the things that are good are using different tools. There's certain cues that you can use to prime yourself into this deeper state. For example, incense is a good one. I don't recommend using stuff because it actually tends to draw you out. But I could have a room that I always use for this. I would have that room already with having added incense, and it already has a certain smell that when I come in, it already gets me almost primed to want to go into a deeper state. There are certain exercises you can do as well, like yoga exercise, certain movements to kind of wake you up a little, to arouse your nervous system. Not sufficient to get you too overly excited, but at the same time, not enough to um, enough to kind of awaken you so that you don't go into slumber the moment you sit down and you try to do some sort of deeper practice. So there's certain cues you can use. You could potentially put some light soothing music at the beginning, or like Ability, who just joined, has mentioned in other spaces that he's been in, is using binaural beats. So often what I like to do is do more of a yin yoga type practice in the darkness. So I'm not stimulating my senses, but I'm getting my body moving as I'm listening to binaural beats. And then once I feel like I'm getting into a deeper level, a little sweet spot, then I stop, I sit down, and that's when I start to try to maybe focus on my breath. For example, just don't do anything, but just try to sit there calmly without agitating the body. I will focus on my breathing and attend to it. And if I find myself drifting, I could go back to maybe doing some breathing. Or often there's also mantras that you can do, certain things that you can repeat using beads, for example, like a bead necklace to keep count where I hold a bead. And I can go and repeat something over and over as I move from one beat to the next to keep me in line. And if I feel like I'm waking up a little and I feel like I'm in the sweet spot again, I let go of the beads and I sit calmly. I observe my thoughts without trying to grab them, to do anything with them. It's like often when we do these practices, we're so used to having our mind be like a very turbulent body of water. And what we try to do often when we sit in these practices is like use an iron, and you're trying to iron the water, get it to smooth out and to calm. And all that I'm going to do by using an iron to smooth out the water is to agitate it even more. And so the ability to master that time window takes time. You have to kind of be committed to it. But if you take advantage of that time, because you're waking up at a period where you normally wouldn't wake up, it starts to build like mental stamina that you can carry over to the rest of the day. Go ahead, Austin.
Yeah, it's great you mentioned the binaural beats and how sounds can be so powerful and how they affect our brain, because that's something a lot of people may not know about. I was looking into the alpha waves, and actually I found there's like certain YouTube videos you could find where it's like alpha wave enhancement, alpha wave type music, and it's basically like a binaural beat, or where it's like a song attuned to a certain hertz or frequency, and then like the way it just vibrates in your brain, hits your brain cells and like the parts of the ear, it just triggers something to switch it into that like alpha state. So if you're trying to get into that alpha state, this is something you can try. Use these types of beats or musics with like headphones. It can be very good if you're studying to put something like this on and really just focus, absorb the information. It's been helpful for me in my studies too, and just for like feeling relaxed, getting in that meditative mind state as well. And when we go into talking about lucid dreaming, this will play a role as well. I think some music could aid in it if you were listening to like a hypnosis or guided meditation specifically for lucid dreaming. With these tunes, it could make it really easy for people who have struggled with this, because achieving that alpha state is necessary for any method of lucid dreaming. You're going to want to be able to get into that state. So yeah, we'll go into that when we switch into lucid dreaming a little bit later on. I'll go into two very good methods for how to lucid dream.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I often find myself, if I feel a little bit out of sorts, let's say I had a busy day and I was struggling, I will put some headphones on and I'll turn on some binaural beats. And if I work, if I have to keep working, it really kind of like shifts my brain into another state slowly over time. Another good thing is to step outside and get in contact with nature. There are certain plants that are very suited for this, especially plants that have repeated patterns. I find this particular palm tree that I have in front of my house does this, and I once found myself really out of sorts, and I just went outside to walk my dog, and I just stood there looking at the plant, and literally within minutes, it like a few minutes, it just evaporated, and I felt much different, and then went back in kind of like more in game mode. Of course, the other thing is not allowing yourself to get that far by doing micro practices that break up your routine so that you fit in you and you don't get into a state of high beta, let's say, where you're just out of sorts. So I think that that's another thing that you want to keep in mind is, how are you designing your day, and is that counterproductive? Is it getting you to feel really stressed out more or more agitated? TJ, go ahead.
No, yeah, and that is really good insight. I haven't really heard before either. And I'm very much a beginner in all of these like thoughts and practices. I wanted to ask in terms of like lining up in that 2 hour window, 4 to 6 a.m. Is it possible to like train your body, I guess, to a degree, to be able to just like go off of 6 hours of sleep and then have that 2 hour window of like a deeper meditative state? And like you were saying, you can then transition into then being more like aware and focused throughout the day. Is there a way to like train your body for that?
Yeah, like I wouldn't like assume that at the beginning you're going to be able to stay up. It's absolutely fine. I remember when I started, I literally said, the first day I said I'm going to do this, it would work like this. It was nighttime, and I said, um, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. Nothing will stop me. At 4 a.m., I'm going to wake up. Literally commanded it, lie down, close my eyes, and literally, I promise you, I'm not joking here. At 4 a.m., I opened my eyes. When I looked at the phone that was by me on the nightstand, whatever, it was exactly 4 a.m. I got up, didn't compromise. You can't compromise in your life. Whenever you want something, you cannot compromise with yourself. You either are a hell yes person or a hell no. The people that see a cold body of water and they dip their toe in and then don't go in won't make it. You have to be like, I said I'm going to jump into that freezing body of water, and I'm going to jump in. I said I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. and I'm going to wake up. You don't compromise. But what will happen is that when you wake up and you start your routine, there's going to be a lot of inertia, because remember, habits that we create have been there for a very long time. And so it's very difficult to break those patterns. It takes, on average, this is kind of funny coming from the NFT space, but it actually takes, oh no, I thought it was 69 weeks, 69 days, but it's actually 66 days. So it takes about 9+ weeks for somebody to abolish um, a habit, to kind of like change a habit and create a new one. So you're going to have to know that you're going to have to be patient, and it's absolutely fine. I have a particular setup that I have where I'm meditating on a mat, which allows me to kind of like, I used to have two mats. One where I would do some exercise for like, it depends. You can for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes at most. So like the first part of the first hour is you kind of entraining yourself, getting yourself a little perked up, you could say, so that you can then in the second half sustain the practice of sitting and contemplating, of meditating, maybe focusing on your breathing, maybe just trying to remain still, observing your thoughts, trying to remain calm. It's not trying to do away with the activity of your brain is just being passive, trying to embrace nothing, just enjoying being. So if I am doing that, and like, let's say at 5:15, 5:30, I'm starting to feel drowsy, absolutely fine. The setup that I had was a yoga mat with a couple of blankets kind of on top. And then I had a silk cloth, silk blanket, either silk or wool, but wool is a little bit rougher. The reason why you want silk or wool is because it electromagnetically isolates you, allows you to kind of remain a little bit more focused in your practice. And so I then also have a pillow, a light pillow, so that I can lie down and I'm a little bit uncomfortable, but at the same time, I'm not too uncomfortable that it's bothersome for my body. I'm not on the hard floor, let's say. And so if I'm feeling a little bit drowsy, I will lie down and I will try to stay in that same state, but lying down. Because one thing that often happens when people try to meditate is their head starts to bob. They may, almost like tip over. This is why having good, flexible body that allows you to get into a good seated posture is important. And some yogis will use a little kind of cane looking thing that they put in between their legs and has a little piece that holds their chin up. So it almost like reaches the level of your chin and it props your head up so that you can stay there seated, but your head doesn't, fall forward or what have you. And so it's absolutely fine if I lie down and then I fall asleep. With time, this will happen less. I will fall asleep less. I will stay up more. And there's actually a way to meditate so that you can have not just lucid dreams if you fall asleep, but out of body experiences where now you're fully conscious like you are right now, but not in the physical body. And it instantly abolishes the fear of death. So if you wanted to abolish the fear of death, there's a way to practice meditation and or lucid dreaming so that you never have that fear ever again. Because you know now that you exist separate from the physical body. You can see the physical body lying on the floor. And so there's different ways you can go about doing this. We had a session on like sacred plants, and we talked about that. And I'll be putting that one up on Spotify once I compile a few of the collection. And you may want to go back and listen to that one. So there's natural ways you can do about this. Shortly, I'll share a couple hacks on how to lucid dream. I won't go into details right now. How do you meditate to do this? But hopefully I answer your question, TJ. Did I answer your question, or you wanted me to elaborate more, and then we'll go with Austin?
No, that answers my question perfectly. Yeah, I guess I more so just want to know like beginning steps and just like the type of environment that you create for yourself to just get into that meditative state. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would suggest a couple things. A routine. Establish a routine. Same time, same place, every day. That is why if you say I'm going to be practicing between 4 and 6 a.m., you don't compromise, you do it every day. You will get used to it. Your body will start to become slowly better at it. Your brain will cooperate. Your joints will cooperate. Everything will get into a rhythm. I have actually like a little like shawl, you could call it. It's like a little piece of cloth, like a little blanket. It's very light that I wrap around me. It's like cured. And if I ever find myself having like a rough day, whatever, I just put that blanket on me and it like instantly will evaporate everything because I've already kind of impregnated into that blanket the practice of many years. It's like a temple. Like if you go to some monastery or a Buddhist temple or a yoga ashram, somewhere that they just do one thing, which is contemplation. They're always in a very focused state. They're always relaxed. They're always, it's like a deeply spiritual or what have you state, a higher state of consciousness. They've cultivated that immediately by going there. Your mood changes, your way of thinking changes. That's why people like to go on retreats, get away. Nature can do that as well. But obviously we can't. I'll be sharing the next podcast next week. I'll be sharing how do you integrate nature into your house to help that. So having a room where I've put incense. I love Indian temple. So if you want to write that down, find Indian temple incense. Absolutely my favorite. If you kind of cure the room where you turn it on regularly, the room will acquire that smell. And if you start practicing with that smell, eventually you don't even need to turn the incense on. You will go into the room and you will go into a kind of state. You could start off with music. You could also get some like green tea with mint. And you, before you go into the room, you wake up, you put some cold water, you wash your face, you kind of get yourself a little bit alert. You get your hot water boiling in the kettle, and you start doing some warm-up exercise. You get your body moving a little, some simple yoga sequence. Doesn't have to be anything extravagant, but just kind of like keeping the lights low. You don't want to overstimulate yourself. Once the tea is done and it's steeping, you put it by you and you start some breathing, let's say, and we can teach some breathing technique later on. I will be starting at some point a private Discord for kind of the loyal followers, and I'll be kind of developing a program for those followers. It will be any of the kind of OGs will have a free NFT once we have the NFT, a free NFT airdrop to OGs, only OGs for this project. And so there's a lot of different things you can do. You can do some breathing. And then if you feel like you're relaxed now, let go of doing anything and just sit passively. If your body's an obstacle where it's aching, then maybe sitting isn't ideal. You could do that little setup. And I can, if you send me a direct message, I can set it up at home and take a photo and send it to you, whoever's interested. And then you can lie down as well and try to remain concentrated on your breathing, on your body, on a point in it's called the Chidakash. It's the screen of the mind. When you close your eyes, you can focus on that screen and just don't do anything. Just allow things to happen, whether it's thoughts coming in, whether it's sensations on the body, where maybe it's sounds. You're not trying to do anything. You're just enjoying being. If you feel like you're getting drowsy, take a sip of the peppermint green tea, which will have a stimulating effect. Just a little bit at a time. Take a little sip and then go back to your practice. So what you're in training is you want to train your body to progressively less interruptions. Initially, there will be a lot of interruptions, but with practice, there will be less. Austin, go ahead.
But yeah, when you're trying to lucid dream or enter that alpha state, like having a way, like you're talking about, to just calm down, relax, and have some like self-control and awareness over your own mind, where like you can stay in that state, not really fall asleep and not get too distracted, like that'll all really benefit someone who's trying to lucid dream or trying to get into that alpha state. Another thing you mentioned was the out of body experience. That's a common side effect of using these methods and of lucid dreaming, along with other things like hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis, which all these side effects can be kind of scary and stop people from achieving lucid dreaming. But just because it's scary doesn't mean it can hurt you. It's all just in your head and you can work around it. So don't let that hold you back, because there's a lot of ways to get over that fear. Like personally with me, that's what stopped me from lucid dreaming, because I would get to it, but then I would start like having sleep paralysis or hallucinating, like it looks like there's someone in my room and stuff. And then once that happens, you just get scared in that negative mindset, and then you don't even want to try it because you're too worried about it being bad. But if you push through it and then you experience a lucid dream, it can be beautiful. It can be so good. So like, don't let that hold you back. It's worth working through the methods. Another thing for the sleep paralysis, like you can always wake yourself up from it if you just wiggle your toes. Like there was one time I was doing this method and I couldn't move at all. And I just started wiggling my toes and my fingers. And then like a minute later, I'm out of it, moving my whole body awake again. So if it's too much to handle, you can always just do that. But yeah, like another thing is going out of your body, it can be overwhelming and make you wake up. So you want to try and stay calm if this does happen and like go into the dream and just stay in that alpha state. Because if you get too excited or emotional over it, because like it feels real and it's shocking. So like you're gonna get emotional, you're gonna want to get excited, be like, holy crap, I'm out of my body, like, oh my God. But if you do that, it's gonna wake you up. So you want to just stay calm and observe it. Like this only happened to me once, but I definitely got excited. Like in my experience, it just felt like I was floating up out of my body into the ceiling, and it felt so real, like it wasn't even a dream. But as soon as I like hit my ceiling, was flying, I just got too shocked, too excited that I instantly woke up and then didn't have a chance to lucid dream or anything. So yeah, like the two methods for lucid dreaming are wild and wake back to bed. The wild one is the one that has more side effects like going out of your body, sleep paralysis, and these hallucinations. And that's the one that I've experienced and used most myself. Pretty much it means wake induced lucid dream, WILD. And you just want to lay in your bed and relax pretty much. Kind of get into that mind state like you're meditating, get into that alpha state. Like if you, this method actually would be fire if you did it with Bebe's thing, like where you wake up at 4 a.m. Because at that time, your body is normally in like REM sleep. So if you wake up at the 4 a.m. and then do this, like go back to sleep, you would be very likely to lucid dream. So like, say you fall asleep while you're meditating or trying to stay awake in that 4 to 6 a.m. period. If you do happen to fall asleep, you would be more likely to have a lucid dream in that time just because you woke up like in that REM sleep and then you're going back into it. But that's more related to the wake back to bed method. And the wild method, it starts like at nighttime and you just go straight from wakefulness into the dream. So you lay on your back, like arms straight down, and you just want to relax, meditate until you fall asleep. Just don't move and just keep your mind awake, but let the body sleep. So if you do it right, like you'll just be still meditating, and then eventually your body falls asleep. You'll get that sleep paralysis where you can't really move, and that's how you know you're getting close. Then you may have some hypnagogic hallucinations, but you just want to ignore them, let them drift to the background. Like this just means that you're like perceiving or sensing something that's not really there. It could be a sound, a visual, like a smell, even like any sense that you perceive that's not really occurring. So they can be like random noises and nothing, or they could be scary. It could be like someone in your room or something which may startle you, but if you just don't focus on it and let it fade to the background, it'll go away and you'll be pulled into the dream. However, if you focus on it and pay too much attention to it, it may just be more in your consciousness and be more of an issue. So you just gotta let it go, not worry about it too much, like it's nothing real. And then once you do that, like you'll see other things like pictures forming or little sparks and stuff. You don't want to like look at them directly and focus on them because then you risk waking up if you focus too hard. But just kind of observe them in your peripheral and like let them float by and let them just happen. You don't want to like force anything to happen, but just let your mind form its own pictures. And this is where like the subconscious comes into play. Like whatever you believe really would form and happen. Like if you see a presence in your room, you could say like, oh, I'm dreaming, take me to my dream. And if you really expect it to happen and you're in this state, then that presence will take you, like you'll shift into the dream, your environment will shift because now you're pretty much sleeping. But if you're fearful and you think it's like a negative thing that you're seeing, you're just going to be scared. So you can affirm to yourself like positive affirmations to deal with the fear and to use like the hallucinations and the trippy stuff going on for your advantage to help pull you into the dream. Just say things like, I am dreaming, or if you see a person, a hallucination, say, hey, take me to my dream. I'm dreaming. I am safe. I'm good in my dream. And then you'll feel better. Your subconscious will accept and act on these affirmations. And that's pretty much it for the wild method. Like, once you just stay there still, you gotta fight itches and scratches. Like, it's very hard to do if you don't know how to meditate and if you're not experienced. That's why I say it goes perfect with what Bebe's talking about. Because if you wake up early, you do that stuff. If you can stay awake, like for his whole thing, 4 to 6 a.m., like, then you're good. You could do this wild method because you just lay down, enter that state. Gotta ignore the distractions, the mind chatter, and let it go. So definitely recommend some meditation practices and stuff like that if you're trying to get into lucid dreaming. Now the second method, wake back to bed, it would go good with the 4 to 6 a.m. thing too, because pretty much you want to set a timer for like an hour before you would normally wake up, and then you just sleep. So you sleep, then the timer goes off an hour before you would wake up, and then you wake up at that time. So then you're in your, like, you wake up, you were in REM sleep, now you're awake. You stay awake for like 30 minutes doing like reading or something, and then you go back to bed. When you go back to bed, you'll just be more likely to have that lucid dream because of how your brain works, because of that REM state that you went back to sleep in. So yeah, that's something to think about too. It could work out with Bebe.
Yes, yes, and there are the reason why waking up earlier than you normally would be more conducive to lucid dreaming is because you become a little bit more aware. But the key is you don't want to have the alarm go off. You turn sideways, you hit the phone, let's say it turns off, and all of a sudden you pass out immediately. You actually want to get up. You want to get up, and what I would suggest is um, if you can do it at the 4 a.m. time window, if you're not going to be doing the practice, you're going to try to do more lucid dreaming. There's something called galantamine, GALANTAM, like mine, galantamine. And so this dietary supplement that you would take when you wake up, and it tends to support like your ability to remember dreams, to be a little bit more aware during the dream state. I found it to be absolutely safe, but make sure to, if you're taking any medications like that, to double check with a physician before you take it. But I found that there was no side effects or anything like that. But it's something that I don't use anymore. But this, like, as a beginner, is something interesting to try. And then I would get up, get a little glass of water, drink that, and then I would go lie down if I go back to bed, but I would like prop myself up, like I'm somewhat upright. Like if I just had surgery and maybe I need to be propped up, I can be lying down, that kind of posture. And by not being in such a comfortable state, again, that's why I like my setup on the floor, is because it's comfortable, but it's not comfortable enough that I'm going to just really let go. There's a certain level of arousal that I maintain as I start to drift back into the dream state. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, I find myself dreaming, but in a more awakened state. I'm not in first person, I'm almost like in third person. And it's very interesting because you can do a lot of like more inner research, a lot of study of the self, about the ego and your experiences and even trauma, that I wouldn't be able to do on a normal dream, like if I were dreaming normally. Another interesting strategy I'll suggest is for lucid dreaming more is every time that I do a specific thing, I repeat in my mind, this is a dream, I am dreaming, I will awaken. And so this is a dream, I am dreaming, wake up. This is a dream, I am dreaming, wake up. Every time that in my case, what I chose was every time that I touch something wet. If I washed my hands or I was in the shower, I jumped in the pool, etc., I would repeat, dreaming, this is a dream, wake up. It could be that it's go through a doorway, let's say, you repeat it. And what's interesting is that you entrain your consciousness to say that no matter what, automatically, whenever you experience that. So let's say every time I go through a door, I repeat that. This is a dream. I am dreaming. Wake up. Guess what's going to happen after a while when in a dream I go through a door? I'm going to repeat that. And literally, instantly, you will awaken in the dream. And it happened to me where I told you I used water. And in the middle of a dream, I was walking and it was like raining. And I slipped on a puddle in the dream. And I fell in the puddle. And when that water hit me and I was lying in the water, all of a sudden I was awake. I was dreaming, but I was awake. And I remember I was writing Voyage from Human to God, a book that I haven't published yet. And a part of that I describe in that book was from that dream, where I experienced something about the ego and consciousness that related to this analogy about a forest that I would not have been able to get if it weren't for that. There's a lot of insight you can draw from that dream state. So remember, the first 4 hours is that dreamless state. It's like this state that if you were to awaken and not disturb that state, you wouldn't be able to move the body. Your energy and consciousness are completely removed. That's what happens when you sleep. You start to withdraw energy and consciousness from lower centers of the nervous system. You draw it away from the senses, up the spinal cord, or in this case, it's called the Sushumna Nadi. It's the subtle spine. It starts to go up, and normally we exit in the vegetative parts of the nervous system, like the brainstem, for example, and the midbrain. But if you were to be able to persist and you focus on the space in between your eyebrows and you exit at a higher center, you would draw energy even from those unconscious parts of the nervous system and you exit consciously. People often find themselves in that state by accident. That's the so-called sleep paralysis. And they freak out because they feel like they can't move and they feel out of sorts. Like, what is this? I've never experienced this before. It doesn't feel natural. But the fear is a egoic part of ourself. It's a fear that's built into us, that's very ancient, and it's difficult often to overcome for a beginner. But the more calmer I get, the better the experience. Eventually, you can exit consciously. As I mentioned earlier, there's a way to meditate so that you have these out-of-body experiences where you can fly through the sky freely. You can go to the other side of the globe if you wanted to. And I've had that happen many times where I'm meditating and I'm interrupted by students that live on other parts of the globe because somebody needs help. And I consciously vacate the body, go to another side of the globe, and do whatever it is that I need to do. This is something that people can do freely. They have the power to do anything that technology does, but we can do it better. Like travel across space and time. It's like we want to build this metaverse, but yet we don't realize that we are already in a metaverse. And there are multiple dimensions of consciousness that we don't experience because our nervous system is a filter that prevents us from experiencing that. And the more we train ourselves to expand the bandwidth of experience, the easier it is to see more, to feel more, to grow more, to love more, et cetera, et cetera. And so this all ties to the whole idea of mental health because, again, we want to be more in states of deeper consciousness, but not losing awareness like we normally do. We can't continue to live passing out, being a passive passenger in the dreamlike state, which is a remembrance of these higher states of consciousness that you don't remember usually consciously. And we then wake up and we go back to the same thing we did the day before. We basically almost like Groundhog Day repeat the same cycle, the same loop over and over again. And so we have to awaken, and the awakening often begins during the daytime, and we slowly transition to awaken during the nighttime as well, until eventually you become a master that is awake 24/7. Awake doesn't mean your body doesn't rest. It's that you transition smoothly from the what you call the real world, the waking state. You transition from that into what you think is the dreamlike or spiritual or inner state. You transition from one to the other smoothly. And there's really no difference in which one is more real than the other, because I'm sure many of you have had dreams where you wake up and maybe you woke up in a panic, like let's say, or you were like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that was a dream, or you thought it was a dream and then you realize it wasn't. You thought it was real while you were in the dream, only to realize that it was a dream. But oftentimes, what you will, as you go on this voyage, what happens is that you realize that right now is when you're dreaming, and that you're in a hypnotic state and you haven't fully awakened. And so that voyage of awakening only happens in the here and now. The moment I start to think about the past, I start to do things, I start to agitate myself, I worry about the future, it's the moment that I am no longer in the present, I am no longer living a real life. Being in the now is what will awaken you. That's why mindfulness is so important. Doing simple mindfulness practice, which we can practice at some point if you're interested. And of course, when I talk about things, if there's something that I say that you want to know more of, then just send me a direct message and we'll do an episode. Or if it's a community that you're a part of, I'm more than happy to speak to the leadership there if you want to coordinate on doing an event for the community, whatever works for you, or working privately as well, like more like
Yeah,
a life coaching.
one thing I was thinking people may be interested in is if we did like a space on astral projection and that out of body experience specifically, because I know there's like a whole subreddit dedicated to it and a whole lot of info on it, like a whole community for like astral travel and whatnot. So we could like dive into that if the people are interested. It looks like Babe is into it. That's something we could possibly do.
And I was just going to say, if nobody wants to come up, I'm going to teach you a breathing technique. And then if you're interested, I can give you the infographics on it. This is a technique for combating insomnia. So it's one that you want to do while you're lying down in bed. So does anybody want to come up or share anything? And then otherwise, we'll do this breathing technique and we'll wrap it up. How are you?
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. It's so funny. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was actually just typing up. I was gonna hit you up in the DMs, or because I have a question, but I was like, freak it, I'll just ask. Maybe everyone had a similar experience. But for context, I'm very prone to like astral projecting and lucid dreaming. Like it just comes naturally to me from like a very young age. Um, it wasn't until like high school that I really like started learning about it, and then I realized, oh shit, I could. This is what I've always been doing. Like it just comes naturally. But I had a very wild and strange experience happen to me. It happened like a little while ago, and ever since then, like first of all, I've been like researching about it, and I haven't found anything convincing or anything that will tell me about it. But basically, after this experience that I had, I kind of can't lucid dream or astral project anymore. So I okay, for context, a little while like a year ago, I was like very depressed, and like I was going through a lot of stuff mentally, and I was having a lot of episodes where I would have sleep paralysis. And like what was mentioned earlier, usually when I get sleep paralysis, I don't like get scared. Like I'm already used to it, so I don't like freak out. I just know that my body's going through a state where I'm about to like astral project. That's how familiar I am with my body. Like I listen to my body a lot. So, but I guess because I was depressed and stuff, I was getting a lot of sleep paralysis. And there was a time that, and again, like when you have sleep paralysis, you tend to hallucinate and see things that are not really there in like the real world. Um, but the most, and usually I will see stuff, but mentally I tell myself it's not real and it'll just go away, right? But I've never been touched. And this experience that happened to me, I was actually, something grabbed my hand and I saw the hand, but I didn't see anything like a body behind it. And it freaked the shit out of me. Sorry for cursing. It freaked me so much because I never like was touched, and I didn't know what happened, like what was happening. I didn't know if I was actually projecting, if it was like reality, if I was like, I didn't know. All I know, I was still in my bed, and I felt it, and it spoke me so much that ever since then, it's been a year, and I haven't been able to astral project or lucid dream.
Yeah, one thing like that actually happened to me too, and it is freaky, but that's actually a hypnagogic hallucination just like anything else. It's a tactile hallucination, which is you feel the sensation of touch, but nothing does actually touch you. I had the feeling that someone like grabbed onto my back, and I also heard like a demonic voice auditory hallucination at the same time. It was pretty intense and scary, but like you, I know my body, I know it's just the paralysis, nothing real, so I didn't let it scare me or freak me out. Like I stayed calm and confident and just chilled through it. So then it just went away like once I chilled out, because if you're just calm, it'll go away. But yeah, it's just a tactile hallucination. It can be very trippy in the moment. It feels super real, but nothing's really touching you.
So this is remember. Let me, I guess, explain this in a simple way, without going too much detail because we're running short on time. But this could be a topic that we could do, babe, at some other point. I think you'll be interested. Number one thing is everybody has a certain range of psychic ability. It's like some people may be more apt to, being athletes or having good memory or being good at math. Well, there's a good proportion of people that have the ability, or their bandwidth is a little bit broader. They don't tune in just to what is part of the physical world. Two, just when a person's body passes away, it is similar to sleep. But the difference is that the energy and the consciousness will vacate and does not return. There's not a connection between the consciousness and the body. Therefore, let's say if it happens in the middle of the night, the person will not awaken in the body again. They broke the tie between the body and the self, the disembodied self, whatever you want to call that, consciousness, spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it. So oftentimes, yoga masters will describe even during meditation, having these experiences, hearing voices that want to distract them. These are experiences that are real. And so you, because you're not having an experience just through the bandwidth of the nervous system actually is a protector in a sense, because it limits the amount of energy and stimuli that you otherwise could be getting. This is why it's dangerous often to do this type of psychonautic type research if not prepared, because some people could have an experience, and I've known people that have had this, that maybe dabbled in some like natural uh, plant or something of that sort, and then they had an experience and they never went at it again. They just kind of closed up and became they just navigated through the nervous system for the rest of their lives. They never opened the possibility that the universe had more in store. The problem is that a lot of people navigate through life like the way that you described, unaware that they are like a radio station tuning into this invisible world. And this is part of the problem in psychiatry, in the mental health field, is that psychiatrists have a very poor understanding of this process. And I can say that with confidence, having been in the neuroscience psychiatry field for many years, and I worked with psychiatrists and have friends that are psychiatrists, and I know their struggles in and out. They lack an understanding of this process, and therefore they don't understand well what sleep is, mental health problems are. These are all understood abilities. And if I navigate through life almost like bear, like I'm like this open filter that is just taking stuff in, think about what is in the world. If I go to a dark, shady place in the world, there's going to be dark, shady things there. A criminal, when that individual's body dies, doesn't vanish into nothingness. They persist, able to influence, even without realizing it, our side of the spectrum of life, of consciousness. And so you can, it's very common to have experiences like that where I can feel things, I can see beings that otherwise I may think are not real. There is a very fine line between what I would think is my own creation and something that has a life of its own. And so it just takes a certain skill and experience. As you experience it more, you start to become more in tune with it. The problem is that we often tune into the wrong things. And this is why I talk about in the Art of Stress-Free Living, I devote a chapter to hidden forces. I don't go into a lot of detail, but oftentimes I work with people and I don't work with them long term because they have already attracted into their psychosphere. Imagine the aura around them is just littered with, like Austin mentioned, like you heard a demonic voice. Oftentimes we carry with us almost forces that may be there to limit us, to oppress us, to make us feel like we can, to make us feel like we should be depressed when we should be happy. And this is why I always say one thing: anything that is against you being able to feel powerful, to feel free, to feel love, to experience bliss, etc., is not you. Keep moving past it. Imagine that it's like a lot of grass that's really tall, and you're just pushing that away. You're just moving through this huge grassland, and you're just having to push it out of the way until you get to the clearing. Or you have this like a machete, and you're just hacking away, and you're just kind of doing away with all the weeds until eventually you just get clarity. And that takes time. It takes skill. And one of the things that I recommend is being in the company of enlightened ones, being in spaces like this, reading other inspiring books, things that illuminate you, that get you connected with something higher. Like going to a retreat, or maybe going and spending time with somebody who's powerful, whose voice carries, who motivates you to make change. But if you don't act in the now, then nothing is going to happen. I could sit here and go to as many spaces as I want, but if I keep doing the same thing, I don't establish new habits, then nothing will change. So in this voyage, this is why the Western side of mental health is so important for Eastern practices. Because if I don't get myself right, we probably none of us had the perfect parents, the perfect school system, the perfect upbringing. We don't live in a great society. It's a society that's built with systems that are broken. Therefore, we get to the adult life when we're mature enough, and we're broken in many ways. And so we have to recognize that and work at getting ourselves better, powerful, working with the right people, coaching, or maybe it's the right therapist or what have you, doing the things or developing the right lifestyle choices that get us into the right frame of mind, because something very important with all of what we discussed today is mindset, environment, and support. Who's my support network? That's what I want to build in the NFT space, create that kind of community support network that allows us to build these, what I call digital sages, these really enlightened beings that just take over the space and create amazing change in the world. Support is one, mindset is the other, kind of like this healing component, the things that I do to get myself into this powerful state. And then lastly, environment. I need to look at my environment, my relationships, maybe the job that I choose to have, the people that I associate myself with, my mental chatter in the background. All of these things matter. And I need to groom myself like an instrument that is being tuned slowly into the perfect state so that I can get to the sweet spot, you could say. All right. Babe, I don't know if I answered your question in that long run.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing with us, babe. That was really interesting what you were talking about. If you have like anything else, feel free to say it.
I just want to say thank you for like hosting the space. I saw I tuned in last week on the men's mental health, and and I know Bebe posted about this episode earlier this week, and I was like hoping to get out of work early so I'm able to catch it, and I'm so glad I did. So thank you for hosting the space and allowing me to speak about my experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anytime. And please, anybody who's still here, if you can, afterwards, just make a little tweet and talk about it, just to kind of spread the word to get more people to understand. Because what I really want to do in this space is to really accelerate people's evolution. I spent decades doing this, and I want to be able to accelerate it for people in a short amount of time so that they can make their dreams come true. And more importantly, the only way that you make your dream come true is to unlock your inner genius. Everybody's a genius. And so by doing spaces like this and building what I intend to build is how we're going to be able to do this. The technique is done in steps. So in between each of these what I call multi-part inhale breathing sequence, I would breathe normally. So I would start by simply inhaling and then exhaling. And again, I don't want to try to control the breath. I just want to let the breath be, because if I try to control it, it brings about arousal. It wakes me up a little. I don't want to hold my breath either, because that stimulates the nervous system. So that first inhale and exhale is just absolutely normal. I just inhale, a nice deep, slow breath, but I'm not trying to overly make it slow or long. I'm just doing it normally. Then the next inhale and exhale, I'm going to make that inhale in two parts. So I'm going to inhale and then I exhale. So I'm going to make it with my mouth so you can hear it. And then I exhale. So I inhaled in two parts, making sure that I inhale sufficiently to fill up my lungs enough. And then I exhale. And then my third inhale and exhale is absolutely normal. I inhale. And then I exhale. This I'm doing some of it through the mouth so you can hear it, but it would be through the nose only. Then my fourth inhale and exhale, now I'm going to do my multi-part inhale again, but this time in three. So I'm going to inhale in three parts. And then I exhale. And then my next inhale and exhale is normal. Inhale. And then I exhale. And then my next inhale and exhale, again, it's broken in parts. I will inhale in now not two or three parts, but in four. And I will go and inhale 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I complete my breath. I'm not inhaling for 4 seconds. I am interrupting my inhale 3 times to have 4 breathing, 4 inhale segments. And when I complete those 4 little shorter inhales, I have filled up my lungs, and now I exhale. And you get the point. I keep increasing, and what will happen, what you'll notice will happen, and you can report back later, is you will inhale and exhale, and then inhale for 2 times and exhale, and then inhale normally and exhale. And when you start getting to 3, 4, you start yawning, and it's fine. If you yawn, just let the yawn happen. And then all of a sudden I get to 4 inhales, and I inhale in 4 parts and I exhale. And then now I will start to yawn, and I'll start to feel drowsier and drowsier until eventually I start to let go and I fall asleep. And it works really well. It takes a little bit of practice sometimes. Sometimes you find that you don't fall asleep as you would have thought, but with practice you just get better at it. Any questions about it before we end this? All right. So again, you're inhaling in parts. Every other inhale is normal, but every other inhale, you're inhaling, increasing the intervals of inhales. The first time is 2 inhales, the next time is 3, then 4, then 5. You should not get, typically you don't get all the way to 7, 8, 9, 10. Just you start getting a little bit too relaxed and you fall asleep. All right, so let's wrap it up there, and glad having you here. Share with other people. We'll always share really insightful stuff, and of course, as I get to know people, I see them more often. I don't forget. So whenever I do launch this Discord group and everything else, the server and the project, everything else, anybody I see that's been around a lot will have OG access to this project. And like I mentioned, any OG will be getting an NFT for free, so you'll kind of like be grandfathered in. All right, so I'll let you go. Have a great time and peace out. Have a beautiful evening or day, wherever you may be.